Whoa. Hey everybody, this is Matt. I'm a librarian, local historian, and housing advocate, and I'm very angry, and I'm going to tell you why. We're over here at the Norbridge building and Walbridge Commons. This one's Walbridge Commons, and it's really a textbook case of what's called gentrification, which has been around forever. Oh shoot, hope we can park here. So textbook gentrification is what this is. I'm here with Dogman. So basically we have market rate apartments. There's 17 apartments that are $500, but they're efficiencies, communal living space type of a deal. Those turned out to be for white people, young white professionals. I know that because I talked to one of them after a redlining talk. I said, hey, do you see any black people in these apartments? No. So that's what we got here. Gentrification's been around forever. We're going to break it down. This is going to be a long video. When I did the Creamery video, I said, you know, I don't have personal relationships with these people. I just care about the truth. In this case, I do have a personal relationship with one of the developers behind these projects. The developers know me, N-O-M-I, and the person I have a relationship with, his name is John. People's analysis of gentrification is basically this. There was nothing there, and now, oh crap. There was nothing there, and now there's going to be something there. Therefore, something is better than nothing. That's it. That's pretty much city leaders' interpretation. It is the most infantile, amnesic, if that's a word, white amnesia, insulting interpretation of development, but it's all about white supremacy. That is the analysis you have to have if you're going to perpetuate white supremacy. Black people have been living here for 150 years. This is the most historic black area of Kalamazoo. We're on the northeast side, close to the river. Forget about 150 years. This is where the Native Americans were rounded up, because this was the terminus of 14 of the Native Indigenous people's trails, and they were marched westward down Ransom. 150 years of black history. 150 years ago, this is where black people experienced the segregated school system. Kalamazoo school system decided to create, in 1861, we're going to create a colored school right a block down the parking lot of the Inertia building, the funeral building where the developers live. A decade of school segregation. They said, we're building a colored school. At the meeting, a white lady said, they said we're building a colored school, a segregated colored school for black children, and they have to leave the white schools immediately. Nice, well-intentioned white lady said, can we strike the word immediately out of that, please? They had nowhere to go. Nope, immediately. And then she said, well, can we at least wait till the colored school was built? Nope, immediately. The first expulsion of black students from KPS, 1861, that lasts for a decade. 1873 was probably the most segregated black people ever were in history. Over 90%, perhaps 94% of black people lived in this area, right where we're at. This is in the 1915s when we decided to go dry, prohibition. There was a local option, and the police were straight up. They said, we are going to get rid of the undesirables, and we're going to break up the notorious Negro area. They were talking about this area. This is the most heavily, so 1924, this is when the city decided to determine that this is an industrial zone, right? The first zoning map that they created. Oh, what a coincidence. Black people live in an industrial zone. So they get to consume white pollution. This is where it was redlined, this area, the most heavily redlined area. So much oppression and racist policy happened in this area. But besides that, black people lived here. Dr. Michelle Johnson talks a lot about black solidarity, about not just thinking, it's harmful to just think about black people as objects of racism and as people who resisted that racism, which both are very true. But there's also people carving their own lives independent of those things. People live here, worked here, had businesses, created art, church. So this is the backdrop of gentrification. Gentrification is the opposite of redlining. It's when people want to come back. They got bored of the suburbs. Redlining is when the white people just fled this area in droves. They went to the suburbs, and by the suburbs I mean Eastwood, Westwood, West Nitchell, Oakland Winchell, Millwood, Portage, Vicksburg, Parchment, Oshtemo. Now, the exact opposite. They got bored of the suburbs and want to come back to these black spaces and help and fix them up. That's gentrification. There's a book at the library called How to Kill a City. It goes through all the stages of gentrification, right? You don't displace black renters immediately. That's another infantile interpretation. It takes steps. I wouldn't be surprised if people have already been displaced. So gentrification displaces black renters eventually because the rent goes up. Or black homeowners, which this is mostly a renter area, they could either possibly benefit from gentrification, but again, most people rent here, or their property taxes will just get too high and they can't afford it. So that could happen too. So let's go back to the beginning. In the early 2000s, how did this happen? In the early 2000s, a bunch of people from the funeral industry, 3 people, I believe, John, Herb, and a guy named Mac. I hope I'm right about that. They were the main drivers in rebranding this area the River's Edge, right? Rebranding it, this kind of white River's Edge. So that's the early 2000s. And then this development, I think, came up in 2015 because they had to ask for a zoning change. I hope I'm right about the details. Guess who is the only person against it? Shannon Sykes Nearing. So I went through the notes. I think she used the word gentrification. I think, I'm paraphrasing, she said the community doesn't need this. They don't need $1,800 apartments. They don't even need $500 micro, community watch. I'm going to be talking about gentrification. A black renter is going to come out. 2015, Shannon Sykes Nearing, who has a singular anti-racist consciousness. I love that phrase from Kendi. A singular anti-racist consciousness. She said, we don't need that, but of course they got it, and they built it. And here we are. And talk about personal relationships. This kind of has a good ending, I think. I was doing my redlining talk, and one of my slides was titled gentrification. It has these 2 apartments on it. And to the developer's credit, his name is John. He faced that music head on. He built a critical relationship with me. He came to my redlining program in the Douglas. I mean, he did this harm, and then he publicly apologized, in a newspaper, NLAV, I think, for gentrification. He used that word, I believe, to his credit, and we've developed a personal relationship. I don't want to make this about me. I also don't want to be too modest, but I was part of him stopping the harm. I believe he pivoted. He's dedicated to affordable housing now, and I'm going to do a different video on Harrison Circle, which is not too far away, which I'm going to argue is an anti-racist housing development. It's one of the best affordable housing apartments that I've seen, because I just look at the rent spread, right? That's what matters. So I'm going to do a different video on that. So I have hope that, because gentrification is like a battle for the community, and I hope. And I'm not saying I was the main, there's tons of other people helping to stop this. So I have hope. And Harrison Circle is part of my hope. Same developer doing it. They tried for years to do a super anti-racist project for real poor people. We're talking homeless people, supportive service, housing first model. Maybe I'll do a different video on that. So personal relationships, the problem with white people is we will hold our personal relationships with other white people above anything else. Saving the relationship is all that matters. It matters more than speaking the truth. It matters certainly more than anti-racism work. But I believe this relationship it's the best kind of relationship. It's critical, it's hard, it's uncomfortable. It's always going to have to be that way. So I was in another meeting, not to pick on Rebecca Kick, but whatever. Another meeting with Rebecca, and like I talked about gentrification, she immediately got defensive. Like all city leaders are kind of drinking the same kind of Kool-Aid. And she's like, well, you define what gentrification means, because I have like 8 different definitions. It's like, go read a book. So I forgot what my point was, but the point is that most people that lead the city, the business class, and the city, they defensive, right? They can't face what gentrification does to cities. I think that's all I got for this one. So Norbridge Building and Walbridge Commons.